A man stood in the wilderness with 400 armed men behind him, swords strapped on and tempers already boiling, and a single decision away from committing a massacre he could never take back. He had spent months protecting one of the richest households in the region, asking for nothing more than a small kindness in return during the season when generosity was the expected custom of the land. And when that kindness was refused, mocked even, insulted in front of his own men, he strapped on his sword and set out to kill every male in that household before morning. Nothing stood between that army and that bloodshed except one woman riding out alone to meet them, carrying enough food to feed a small city and enough wisdom to stop a war before it began, armed with nothing but courage and a clear sense of what truly mattered. Her name was Abigail. Her husband's name was Nabal, and scripture tells us plainly and pointedly what that particular name meant. This is the story of a fool whose arrogance nearly destroyed his household, and the remarkable woman whose courage and discernment saved it, along with the future king of Israel, from a blood guilt he would have carried for the rest of his life. David, at this point in his life, was a fugitive, anointed king by Samuel but not yet enthroned. He was fleeing from King Saul's relentless jealousy, living in the wilderness of Paran with roughly 600 men loyal to him, men who had left behind homes and security to follow a king without a throne. Far from a band of outlaws terrorizing the countryside, David's men had spent an extended season functioning as an unofficial protective wall around the flocks and shepherds of a wealthy man named Nabal, a Calebite living near Carmel in Judah. Scripture describes David's men as being like a wall around Nabal's shepherds both day and night, guarding them from raiders and thieves throughout the entire time they were in the field, never once helping themselves to anything that belonged to Nabal's flocks, a restraint that in the lawless wilderness was no small thing. Nabal himself was a man of considerable wealth, with 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats grazing across the hill country of Carmel, but scripture introduces him with a description that leaves no room for ambiguity. He was surly and mean in his dealings, harsh and evil in all he did. His name itself, Nabal, means fool, and his wife's own words later in the story make clear this was no accident of naming. He was, in every sense that mattered, exactly what his name declared him to be. When sheep shearing time arrived, a season traditionally marked by feasting, generosity, and celebration throughout the ancient Near East, David sent 10 of his young men to Nabal with a respectful request. They were to greet him in peace and remind him gently of the protection David's men had provided all season, protection that cost Nabal nothing and had likely saved him considerable losses. David instructed his men to ask, in essence, for whatever provisions Nabal could spare, appealing to the customary generosity expected during a prosperous shearing season, and noting that his young men had done Nabal no harm and taken nothing from him the entire time they were together in Carmel. Nabal's response was breathtaking in its contempt and its short-sightedness. "Who is David?" he sneered. "Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?" In a single dismissive outburst, Nabal erased months of protection, insulted David's identity and lineage, and treated him as nothing more than a runaway servant unworthy of basic hospitality. A shocking breach of the deeply held cultural expectations of generosity towards those who had earned it. David's young man returned and reported every word, and David's response was immediate and severe. "Put on your swords," he commanded, and roughly 400 men strapped on weapons and set out toward Nabal's household, while 200 remained behind with the supplies. David's own words as he marched reveal exactly how personally he took the insult. "It was useless," he said, "to have protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness so that nothing was missing, and now he has paid me back evil for good." He swore an oath that he would not leave alive a single male belonging to Nabal by morning. This was no idle threat. It was a march toward the total destruction of an entire household, driven by righteous grievance curdling into something far darker. Meanwhile, back at Nabal's estate, one of his own servants recognized the danger with far more clarity than his master had shown. He went to Abigail, Nabal's wife, and laid out the situation plainly. David had sent messengers from the wilderness to greet Nabal, and Nabal had hurled insults at them, even though David's men had been very good to them, providing protection like a wall both day and night the entire time they were together in Carmel, and nothing was ever missing from anything that belonged to Nabal's flocks, a restraint that in the lawless wilderness was no small thing. Abigail responded, revealing exactly why Scripture would later describe her as intelligent and beautiful, a woman whose wisdom matched her striking appearance. She wasted no time on discussion or debate with her husband. She acted immediately and decisively, gathering together 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, loading them on donkeys, an enormous, carefully calculated peace offering, meant to communicate genuine honor rather than a hasty apology. She told her servants to go on ahead of her, and she would follow, but crucially, she said nothing to Nabal about what she was doing. As Abigail rode down into a mountain ravine, she came face to face with David and his 400 armed men descending toward her from the opposite direction, the exact collision course her servant had warned her about. She wasted no time. She quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground, falling at his feet in a posture of total humility, despite the fact that her household had done nothing personally to deserve blame for her husband's arrogance. What followed was one of the most remarkable speeches in all of Scripture, delivered by a woman who understood exactly what was at stake and exactly how to diffuse it, choosing every word with the precision of someone who knew she would only get one chance to be heard. She took the blame entirely upon herself, asking David to let the fault be hers alone, even though the insult had come from her husband and not from her. She asked that David pay no attention to that wicked man, Nabal, explaining that his name meant fool and folly went with him, a bold and pointed acknowledgement of her own husband's failure, spoken not to excuse him, but to separate him clearly from the household David had been protecting. Abigail explained that she herself had not seen the men David had sent, framing herself as an innocent party working urgently to correct a wrong she had only just learned about through her household servant. She presented the provisions she had brought as a gift for the young men who followed David, and then she moved from apology into something far more significant, a prophetic appeal grounded in David's future rather than merely his present. She acknowledged that the Lord had kept David from bloodshed and from avenging himself with his own hands, framing her timely arrival itself as an act of divine intervention rather than mere coincidence. She reminded him that the Lord would certainly make a lasting dynasty for her Lord because he fought the Lord's battles, and that no wrongdoing would be found in him throughout his life. Even now, she said, if someone pursues you and seeks your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God, but the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. Then she delivered the line that reframed everything David was about to do. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself with his own hands. Abigail was not simply asking David to spare her household. She was warning him that the future king of Israel could not afford to begin his reign carrying the guilt of a massacre committed in a moment of wounded pride over a fool who was never worth the cost. David's response revealed a man capable of remarkable self-correction in the heat of his own anger, a rare quality in someone who had just sworn a bloody oath moments before. "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me," he said. "May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands." He acknowledged plainly that if Abigail had not come quickly to meet him, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. He accepted her gift and sent her home in peace, his sword still sheathed, his conscience still clear. Quick word from our sponsor before we continue the story. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Wisdom under pressure, the kind Abigail showed riding out to meet an army, is not something most of us come by naturally. Sometimes we need a space to process our own anger, our own impulsive decisions before they cost us something we cannot take back. BetterHelp connects you with licensed therapists who can help you build exactly that kind of clarity in your own life. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Visit the link in the description to get 10% off your first month. When Abigail returned home, she found Nabal in the middle of a feast fit for a king, and scripture notes pointedly that he was very drunk, oblivious to how close his entire household had come to annihilation while he celebrated his own wealth. Wisely, she said nothing to him that night, waiting until morning when the wine had worn off and he could actually comprehend what she had to say. When she finally told him everything, what David had intended, how close his household had come to complete destruction, and how she had intervened without his knowledge, his heart failed him and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, his response was one of praise rather than triumph. "Praise be to the Lord," he said, "who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head." David recognized even in this outcome